Hi, welcome to Conspiracy Cases. My name is Jeff Dixon, and we are looking at stories that come from the pages of history that when the story is told, inevitably it will cause questions to be asked. Conspiracy theorists begin to look for cover-ups. They look for deeper meaning. They look for things below the surface that may not be as apparent to everyone else. And sometimes, as they ask questions, they come up with a lot more questions than they do answers. In this conspiracy case, we look at the death of Di. On the night of August 31st, 1997, something terrible actually happened. Princess Diana was killed in a fatal car crash in Paris, and the effects would be felt around the world. But that is where the story ends. Because for some, that night wasn't simply a tragic accident. Instead, it was a result of some kind of conspiracy conducted by agents of the British state or something else, or so go the cover-up claims. Numerous reports, investigations, and experts have all agreed with the official accounts of the events. The official account is simply this: Diana was being driven in a car by a man who was drunk. And that failing, as well as other institutional ones, allowed for the tragedy to happen. Everybody agrees on that. But others believe that something more secretive and intentional happened that night. The conspiracy theories take on a number of forms, but all claim to point to the same fundamental belief that someone wanted to kill Diana. And they helped orchestrate the night's fatal events. The conspiracies were so convincing and widespread, helped by the Daily Express and Egyptian businessman Mohammed al-Fayed, that the Met Police were forced to launch Operation Paget, a report, if you will, to establish what really happened and see if there were any truths to those conspiracy theories. It lasted for years, cost millions of pounds, and they discovered, and their conclusions were that all the conspiracy theories were without merit, and what happened was an unfortunate accident. But the conspiracies rage. And even though the report says there's nothing to see here, there's no there, that has not caused the conspiracies to lessen. For example, there's a conspiracy that says that Diana was pregnant. This is according to Mohammed al-Fayed. And that was the reason for killing Diana. Diana had become pregnant with his child's son. And that was unpalatable to British royalty. The royal family could not accept that an Egyptian Muslim could eventually become the stepfather of the future King of England, which is exactly what would have happened had Diana married a son and they had begun a family. Stepchild would have been the King of England one day. That just couldn't be stomached by the royal family. Discussion of the potential pregnancy was something that was very apparent before Diana ever died, but there was no sign of pregnancy during the post-mortem examination. Further tests, as pointed out in the report, said that Diana was not pregnant. And there are no credible reports that Diana was pregnant. Numerous close friends and others said that pregnancy was never part of their conversations. Yet that conspiracy continues. Another conspiracy, Diana herself believed that she was going to be killed by the establishment. The main factor behind this is that Diana herself thought that she was going to be killed, and so much so that she put it in writing. Paul Burrell, Diana's one-time butler, had been given a letter for safekeeping. The letter reads, and I quote, "I'm sitting here at my desk today in October longing for someone to hug me and encourage me to keep me strong and hold my head high. This particular phase in my life is the most dangerous." And then there are three dots. Dot, is planning an accident in my car, brake failure, and serious head injury in order to make the path clear for Charles to marry," she wrote. The letter appears eerily on the mark. And indeed, it had history. When Diana wrote the letter, she had experienced problems with her car. She'd voiced fears about him. Her bodyguard had died in an accident, and she believed that had been a conspiracy. Diana was concerned about her safety, and that's not really a conspiracy theory at all. But there appears to be no official suggestion that the royal family wanted to have her killed, although that's what the insinuation is. That too fuels the conspiracy. Another is that the paparazzi made the car crash intentionally. Photographers were blamed repeatedly and continue to be for Diana's death. The story caught on in part because it reflected a concern that had pursued Diana throughout her life, that the paparazzi were always after her and always intent on causing her harm. As a result, on that night when she died, the car seemed to be trying to elude and escape paparazzi that night, and as a result, that led to the accident that took her life under that bridge in Paris. So did the paparazzi cause it? Did they do it intentionally? So goes the conspiracy. Driver Henry Paul intentionally caused the crash. Another one of the conspiracy theories. Henry Paul was the head of security at the Ritz Hotel in Paris, but conspiracy theorists believe that he was in the payroll of another organization, security forces in France or the UK, or both. People who doubt the official course of events say that a central claim about Mr. Paul being drunk at the time of the crash were not only false, but lies spread by the media to cover up the killing. And that was done by swapping his body with another person, so the toxicology reports would never appear correct. There are a number of other reasons that people believe Mr. Paul wasn't drunk. They said he didn't behave drunk earlier in the night, for instance. Beliefs about him being in the pay of security services came from the fact that he appeared that he would have more money than would be expected, and that some security offices have suggested that he might have had a French source inside the hotel. Now, has any evidence actually come forth that's solid that proved that? No. But repeated checks of the toxicology reports do indicate that Henry Paul had indeed been drinking. Another conspiracy theory suggests that there was something wrong with the Mercedes that Diana was traveling in. Conspiracy theorists claim that the route that she was taking was blocked and that the car was driving at an unusual speed and something had been tampered with inside the car. And as a result, when you take all of those factors together, then all of a sudden what happened was a situation that was a grand moment where paparazzi's chasing them in order to avoid another car. The car overcorrected because the car was faulty. It led to what was a high-speed crash underneath that bridge, and she died. The car had been tampered with, even though, according to official reports, none of that had taken place. There were bright lights, it said, and strange vehicles on the road. Numerous people reported seeing flashes as the car headed into the tunnel where it would crash. Flashes that were blamed for the crash itself. But the problem was that different times, different places, a lot of lighting issues were taking place around this particular event. There were photographers following the car, the light of the headlights of the vehicles. None of them appeared necessarily to be malicious, but yet that is part of the conspiracy. Another part of the conspiracy theory deals with the fact that doctors allowed Diana to die on purpose by not treating her in the proper way. They stopped her from recovering. Can this be proven or disproven? Well, part of it revolves around the way that they respond to emergencies in the United States as opposed to the way that they respond to emergencies in the UK. Very often, in United States scenarios, if an ambulance arrives, then what happens is that they do their best to get you to the hospital as quickly as possible, and they stabilize you rapidly fast to get you in the vehicle to do what needs to be done when you get to the hospital. In the UK, that is not the approach. In the UK, believe it or not, the way that emergency responders respond is they give treatment at the scene before they ever consider moving that person to the hospital. The point is not to stabilize them, or it's not about getting to the hospital sooner. It's about using their ethical code and doing everything that they could to prep that person before they ever got them into the hospital. Now, had they gotten Diane to the hospital quicker? Could she still have been alive? Would she have pulled through? Could she have made it if they would have broken protocol instead of trying to take care of things at the scene, move her quickly to the hospital? Nobody knows. Another part of the conspiracy theory, Diana's bodyguard was killed off. It is believed that her security guard was killed on purpose. And this was a conspiracy that ramped up, especially in the aftermath of Diana's death. A freak accident had taken his life, and all of a sudden that became just more evidence that Diana herself had been executed by those in power. So, was she murdered, or was it a horrible accident? Conspiracy theorists will tell you the biggest cover-up ever has taken place. That's driven by the still grieving father who has continued to push this narrative to the point where others have taken it and run with it and made almost a science out of it. But is there a spiritual lesson that we can draw from this? And the answer is, of course. A lesson that can be drawn from the conspiracy theory that Diana was murdered can focus on themes of trust, justice, and the human tendency and need to come up with answers in the midst of tragedy. See, the conspiracy theorists suggest that Diana's tragic death wasn't an accident at all, but an orchestrated event. It reflects a deep mistrust in authorities and a yearning for justice. And it echoes a broader human instinct to find meaning and seek justice when faced with unexpected loss. In moments of tragedy and uncertainty, it is natural for us to want something to hang our hat on, something to pin our coat to, something that we can use as an anchor point to make sense. That's a reflection of divine justice that we see in Scripture, where God is portrayed as a righteous judge who knows all and sees all. Romans 12:9 reminds us that vengeance belongs, or 12:19 reminds us that vengeance belongs to the Lord, and He will balance the books. The lesson reminds us to trust God and His ultimate justice and timing, rather than being consumed by theories and fears that lead us down rabbit holes of just more questions and more innuendo and more things that we're never going to have an answer to. It reminds us that in a world full of uncertainty, our hope and peace comes from one source and one source alone, and that's God. Here's why. God sees all, He knows all, and God ultimately brings hope and He brings justice, even when human systems fail us. So, was Diana executed? Was this all a conspiracy to keep her away from the love of her life? Was it because she was pregnant? Was it because they didn't treat her properly? Again, that's the stuff of conspiracy case. But at the end of the day, we understand why those conspiracies show up and how they're driven by a need that we all have to secure the answers that come from a source that can always be trusted, and that's God. I look forward to joining you next time as we open another conspiracy case.